Heather Mann called the Commercial Fishing Users Group Committee meeting to order at 9 a.m. on March 7th, 2019. The audio of the meeting follows.
It's recorded. Everybody be aware of that. And I generally, we have a public comment at the front and the end of the agenda, but how I like to operate is as we go, take public comment within reason. So that the public can be involved in the conversation. So let's look at the agenda. Are there any changes? It looks like we have a presentation from Aaron, and then we're going to talk about updating the document that describes the use of the international terminal, and then discuss any future agenda items. Is there any other changes or any? Okay, so why don't we go to number 3, the first public comment period. Does anybody have anything to say before we get started? Okay. Aaron. Okay, Aaron, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to take an opportunity to present a couple of ideas that I have, and the purpose for this is not to say this is what we got to do, but rather to float some ideas around and get some feedback from our customers and see how some of this stuff might impact you, and help me come up with a better plan. If you know, because there's always a better way. So what I want to go over is I just wanted to take I got a couple pictures. I know you guys have been here longer than I have, so people know what the marina used to look like, but I think when you start thinking about the future, it's always constructive to take a moment and remind yourself where it is that we came from, what it used to look like, and so you can get an idea how much things change over time. Talk a little bit about what we need the commercial marina of the future to look like. Run through this Port Dock 5 and 7 electrical project that is not yet on the capital improvements list, but I think it's definitely something we need to get on there. Talk about service life extension programs or projects to fill the gap between projects, and a couple ideas of how we might get there. And again, please let me know, some ideas. So here's a picture of the marina from 1959 or 60. You can see the Port Dock 5 pier structure, and of course where the fill is now, where our office is, and you can get an idea of where the docks kind of came from around that time. This is 71. South Beach Marina was that project was undertaken in 78, so this is right before, a few years before that happened. And so without a recreational marina, we had a lot more recreational boats in the marina, but that's the way it looked in 71. And the interesting thing about this is if you look at a current picture and you compare the two, there's not that much difference in the overall footprint between now and then, other than the fact that we actually have parts of 7E and F that have been removed because they got bad enough that they couldn't be used anymore. So the marina's a little bit smaller. However, we've got an additional marina over in South Beach for recreational purposes. And then, of course, there's definitely been changes in users of the port. The 38-foot salmon trawler is not as prevalent as it used to be. And you can definitely see that in this picture, and it kind of gives us an idea of what the shape of things needs to be as the industry progresses. An idea for the pathway where we would need to go would be to come up with a plan for new docks, permit for the new docks, extend the service life of Port Dock 5 so that we can get to the point where we can rebuild it at some point. And in my opinion, Port Dock 7 is in bad enough state that we need to get working on new docks for Port Dock 7 in the short term because it's much worse than Port Dock 5, obviously. So, which leads us to electrical improvements that I think are necessary. Go ahead.
Aaron, on that last slide, where does unless you're going to talk about this slide here, but the grant that you're going after now to do work, how does that fit into here? Is it extending the service life? Is it?
Yeah, I think I would count it as extending the service life of Port Dock 5. I didn't put it in here because to me it's before all of this. That project, if we can get that grant, would be undertaken this year. So what I focused on more or less here is a couple years in the future. But if for all intents and purposes, we need to get that. We need to get. I mean, these are not wants; these are needs. I mean, these projects that most people know and really are in desperate need to get done. So we got a plan to be able to get Port Dock 5 pier done, and so it comes before this stuff basically.
Okay.
But it certainly would extend the service line Port Dock 5, and it adds the conduit that's necessary to do the upgrades to 50 amp service on Port Dock 5 as well. So it's all kind of tied in, and it's all tied in overall to a larger plan that we got to talk about and run through the public comment process on to be part of this this strategic business plan that we're working on right now. And I'd encourage everybody to participate in that process so we can find the best roadmap to get there. So. This electrical improvement project, this really started coming to the forefront for me as we were doing the planning for the Port Dock 5 pier. When we got the engineer to take a look at we thought it was going to be a simple cutover of power from the old structure to the temporary structure to the new one. But in order to get the engineer to put a stamp on it, we are going to have to dedicate to losing 8 breakers on Port Dock 5 because right now it's over capacity for the modern code. So, between that and the fact that we know we've got pedestal issues down there, I really the electrical upgrades on the dock for me became I think one of the most important first steps that we got to do to get things to last at least another 10 years. That's a picture of this pedestal right here I believe is over on Port Dock 3, but we have pedestals like this on Port Dock 5. On B, right?
Yeah.
A, sorry. But it's representative of all of our pedestals in that it is past its service life and it's obsolete. So you can see the corrosion in there, and then bear in mind you can't get parts for these things anymore because they're too old. So it definitely is time for us to move up. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So where is there a specific area where those pedestals will be lost? Because there's already kind of a shortfall of pedestals on Dock 5.
Yeah,
there is.
There's some on every wing that they would have to be taken out of service.
We haven't figured it out yet, no.
Is that just because you say the new codes are such that do we need to put bigger wire in there? Or?
It's got to do with the way that you. I learned about what I believe it's called apparent diversity. So that when you plan the capacity of an electrical box. You have to. They don't make you plan for 100% load on it. They let you go down a certain percentage because they don't think that we're going to always be operating with every single plug in and turned on at maximum load. So what's happened is over the years they reduced the percentage that you have to plan. So I'm sorry, I got that backward. Yeah, no, they reduced it. So we are. Planning wise, we have to add more capacity because we have to plan for more load on the facility. That's the way it worked out. So we have to add more circuits into a larger box is what it looks like. And we had to commit to do that. Was that?
Is that cost prohibitive, or it's really not going to be good if we lose a bunch of opportunity to plug in?
No, it won't be. But in order to keep things moving ahead, we had to to get the engineer's stamp on it, we had to say, okay, we can do this. In the meantime, we can possibly figure out a way to add enough capacity to keep some of those on, or we're gonna have to figure something out. But we don't know yet how it's gonna look. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the docks are full as they are, and everybody basically. I mean, that's what tying up's all about, is usually plugging in, I mean, you want to tie up and you want to plug in. So
yeah, I mean, if you're not able to plug in, you have to run a generator at a couple of gallons an hour at $3 a gallon. It gets expensive in a hurry.
Yeah, somebody's got to watch it and everything else, it's a problem that we still need to come up with a solution to. We haven't figured out yet. In addition to that, we need to upgrade to 50 amp service, at least to provide it as an option to people, because as you guys know, that's what a lot of people use nowadays. The load, like I said, the load center up that feeds the dock needs to be upgraded, and we already talked about all this here. So, and the lighting, which is a lower level issue. I think we're just gonna consolidate on the power pedestals more than likely whenever it comes time to do this, because those poles are not. People's bow flare wax into them and they get broken over time. So not a real good design. Then you got Port Dock 7 as well. So when we go to do Port Dock 7, those same sort of upgrades are going to need to be done. And this is what the box that feeds the dock on Port Dock 7 looks like. And I think it was redone in the early 90s, but it's starting to rust through on the bottom. And we haven't opened it up to see what the inside looks like, but it's definitely getting to the point where it needs to be replaced. So we got issues there as well. What we'd like to do is extend the service life of Port Dock 5, prepare for infrastructure improvements on Port Dock 7, so that we can, add larger slips and accommodate for the boats that are going to be coming here in the future as well as in the present day. Increase electrical safety by replacing old power pedestals and upgrade to 50 amp service. And it would be great to get this done on a 3-year timeline simply because I think it's in that bad a shape. We've talked a lot about power pedestals in the last couple of years, so yeah, go ahead.
So Aaron, before you said that this was all after the Port Dock 5 improvements that we're looking at now, or safety issues that have to be addressed. But that project is out a little ways, right? So you need to get the grant and secure all the funding. Is that a 1 or 2 years? I mean, you say get this done over 3 years. So you mean 3 years from today? Or
yeah. So it would be 3 starting this fiscal year. This coming fiscal year would be 1, and then 2 and 3 after that.
So starting July 1, 2019.
Right. Ideally, what would happen is we get this grant. It comes back and it's good. We can get the Port Dock 5 pier built this fall. And then we save money in the meantime for electrical improvements to get the docks taken and the pedestals taken care of. And then, 3 years from that point, we're up and running with new power on the dock. So that's ideally. But, the best laid plans of mice and men go off and awry. So this is what the cost looks like. This is what I've come into so far. I got an estimate of $254,000 for new conductors and the panel upgrade and new pedestals on Port Dock 5. We still need to purchase new power pedestals on top of that, and then I added 25% for future increases that are possible. So it's around. It may be less than that. It could possibly be more because you just don't know. But and then you have for upland utilities on Port Dock 7 to get it ready, it'd be about $268,750. So right around $500,000 to do both of them. That's what an overall what it kind of looks like. So what we're looking, this is an advisory group, not just to the commission, but to staff too. So we don't want to, we want to be able to understand what kind of things impact you guys and how it change your decisions on what you do. And before we ever started touching rates or doing anything like that, we want to talk to everybody and see what would happen. So what I hope to get from you guys is, some ideas on how we can address some of these concerns. So this gives you an idea. I went back 3 years. I wish I'd have gone back 5 now, but I ran out of time. So we've had a drop in moorage revenue over the last 3 years. And I think that if you look at the numbers, what you'll see there is people switching from semi-annuals to annuals. And so it's a better buy at the annual rate, and I think people are going that route. So you see a drop in overall moorage because of the discount on the annual moorage rate. This is what the discounts look like on that far right column. You can see the bottom line on what the discounts are. So on an annual moorage, you get it at a 75.76% discount. And obviously those are structured so that, because like you guys have pointed out before, whether or not you get a semi-annual or an annual, or when you buy your moorage, it depends on when you're going to be here and how long of the year you're going to be here and where else you're fishing out of and things like that. So rates ought to go up over time because the prices of everything go up. This is what we did last year. Just kind of gives you an idea of what we wound up last year at. I think it looks like, the monthly was 5.6. The annual went up 4.5%. Some of those real slight percentage adjustments were to try and keep that last number at a whole dollar amount instead of having to mess with, cents and fractions of cents. So the question that what I would like to be able to come up with a solution to is how can we fund those electrical upgrades? And there's a list of possibilities there. And so we could go any individual one of those or any combination thereof. It's just that, I want to be cognizant of whatever changes we make, they impact people in different ways. If we can come up with the funding, ourselves without having to go out for grants, as you pointed out with the Port Dock 5 Pier project, there's uncertainty involved with the grant and whether or not it gets approved. So if you can fund it ourselves, then the certainty of being able to get this project done goes up. If we can't fund it ourselves, then we might be able to go out and get some additional funds, but we don't necessarily control those funds, so it's kind of questionable. So what I'd like to be able to do is stand here and say, we're going to be able to get this done for sure. And I don't know, whatever combination of fundraising we can do is going to get us there. We'll have to wait and see. In any case, they all have different impacts on everybody. Yeah. So this is so one idea that I came up with that I mentioned at the last user group meeting was to possibly figure out some sort of scheduled increase of mortgage rates, and then take that just the additional funding that came from it, that incremental difference between what it used to be and what it would be in the future, and put that into a protected, a restricted construction fund assigned to that project on a specific timeline, whatever that timeline works out to be. And of course, the timeline impacts what you need to do percentage-wise on the rate increases in order to pay for it. And all of those numbers are variable and adjustable, but we don't want to make changes to these things without talking to people and figuring out, what would it do? Would it cause you an undue hardship? Would it cause you to make a different decision in your business and things like that? Because all of that's going to affect what we could do at the end of the term. So, yeah.
Can you help me with the numbers? So it looks like what you're generating is not close to what you need.
Well, okay, so I wanted to just show you the numbers of what if. So if we went with an increase of 5% the first 2 years, this is based on that number in the upper left-hand corner, which is 418,174. That's what our revenue was last year. And of course, and again, you got to remember our mortgage rates our mortgage revenue has gone down. So you have to make an assumption there and figure it's going to stay in that ballpark. So if you increase this year at 5% on mortgage, and then 5% more in year 2, and then 10% in year 3. Generally speaking, that's what it gets you. It doesn't get you a whole lot, even at that. So it's something to be aware of. And at 5%, that's what we did last year. So that's kind of what it looks like, over a 3-year time period with that. This is what it looks like if you went more aggressive with it. And those are hard numbers to stomach, but it does get you more money at the end of the thing. So it basically ends up with a higher degree of certainty, especially if you put those funds into the construction fund, restricted at the commission level, so it can't be spent on, take your pick, anything that comes up between now and then, or because that's one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people over the last couple of years is we're not opposed to increases in rates, but we can't do it if it's going to go into a black hole, or if it's going to South Beach, or some study or something like that. But and I'm not saying that this is what you'd have to do, but this is what the numbers look like if you did it. So,
question.
Yeah.
So if we went with these rates, raised it up, you got all this money for that project. At the end of the project, when it's done, would the mortgage go back down to where it originally was? Or is it going to stay at those high levels?
Yeah, I don't know. That would be something for you. What I would like to be able to do is keep doing projects. That's what I want to get done. Is more, because we got rubber boards and more dock rods that got to be done. That's what I'd like to be able to do. But if those numbers aren't sustainable, then that's something part of the discussion you have to have and say, look, hey, can't do it.
Tell us about the grants and what we can expect there.
Yeah, that's a tough one to be able to expect anything, and that's why right now it's hard for us to get grants. We hope that after we complete this business plan and things change around the state, that we will be very competitive at grants, but I don't know for sure. I can't tell you standing here right now that it's going to come to pass. It would be great if we could get them, but that's I can't stand here and say we could do a project in 3 years and we're relying on grants to get it, because I just don't know. I don't even know what this one that we have that we just put in for that I think we are competitive for. I can't for sure guarantee the project's going to come pass until we get a grant letter that says you're good to go.
We should know a bit more later in April about state funding and our access to that in terms of possible dollars coming through over the years.
Do we need to act on rate mortgage increases until we hear from whether we need grants or not?
I don't know.
It's part of the budget process, and the budget ultimately gets approved late June. So any rates we talk about increasing are part of what the commission approves in that process. So, in terms of answering that specific question, that I think there's some give in that time frame that you could wait until we hear more from the state when the strategic business plan is completed.
I see. Okay.
Aaron, on the mortgage revenue, is that just Port Docks 5 and 7?
That's right. Yeah, this is just the commercial marina. That's all we're talking about.
And then you've made comments at several commission meetings or public meetings that you've had to turn vessels away that have wanted annual mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So you don't expect that number to continue to decline because you're at the limit, and there are other people that want annual mortgage. They can't get it.
Well, so it's looking at it is a really interesting thing. It's possible it could decline. It could also go up. It depends on what type of mortgages get bought, and then it also depends. It's also somewhat weather dependent, and then fisheries dependent, obviously too. Because if we have a really good fishery, tuna year, for example, we get a lot of transient boats coming in. If the weather is not the greatest and it's real windy, and they spend a lot of time at the dock for some reason, then our revenue, because we gain a lot of revenue on those short-term mortgages. But if more people say, it's a better buy for me to switch to an annual from a semi-annual, and we do that, then it's possible that it could go down if it's coupled with a poor tuna year or any other number of variables. So it's possible. But of all the variables, what I think is that for the port, mortgage revenue is more stable than a lot of the other types that we get, like services, for example. Because if we have a poor crab season, it hits the fishermen more directly, and it hits the port more directly. The way I view mortgage, the cost of mortgage is more like a staple in the grocery store. It's as far as the fishermen's expenses, it's not one of their top expenses, depending on the operation. It's something that they generally speaking have to get someplace, and there's a lot of it that comes. There's a lot of different customers that come to the port for it, so it's more stable than. It's less tied directly to the fishery. That's the way I look at it for us.
So follow up to this, have you talked to the city or the county? I mean, what happens if this project doesn't get funded? I guess you have some serious safety concerns.
Yeah.
Which you probably already have. I hear people are getting electrocuted or shocked. And then the docks then become unusable, and then boats leave town to go someplace else if they can't be serviced. When boats leave Newport, that doesn't just affect the revenue at the Port of Newport, that affects the city, that affects the people that come here for tourism, it affects the earned income in Lincoln County. So it would seem to me that partnering with the city, partnering with the county on whatever you do here, they should have an interest in seeing this project happen. Some kind of a rate increase, we've talked about that before, but something that people can weather and then use it as leverage to get grant money or other money. And I think one person missing here maybe are the traditional seafood processors, the larger operations who benefit from their boats being able to be here in town. Maybe having them give a financial contribution of some sort. I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of ways to fund this as a cooperative approach.
Yeah.
but that's just my initial thoughts. So other people on the committee, do you have comments or questions, or is this the end of the presentation?
I can't remember if that's my last
No.
slide. I think I got a couple more yet.
Okay, David?
I just have a question on the rate increases, the way you have them set there. Yearly a port should raise their fees to coincide with electrical, utility costs, and all other costs. So if you're capping this and for a reserve fund, for target projects, where are you going to get excess revenue? I mean, you're capping this, okay? It's like a urban renewal project, but in reverse, because you aren't going to be getting any more for a certain period of time, any more revenue from these facilities because you're capping it and it's going into a reserve fund. What's that going to do to your budget?
It's going to freeze it at the current level, basically.
Well, that's right, but everything continues to go up every year.
Right.
I mean, even on construction fees, most state projects now require you to put in a 3% increase on any budgeted project you do. So as these are going up, your budget's going to have to be going down, right?
That's right.
Every year. So have you accounted for that in your budget?
We haven't come up with the specific numbers for it, but that's the concept that we would have to figure out. We would have to do that.
Because you might have to, you might set these rates at that and all of a sudden realize, well, hell, it's hurting us here in management. We're going to have to raise it another 3% to catch up with where we were.
This is a very initial
Right.
conceptual discussion with this group for feedback. So you're right, we haven't crunched all of those numbers to look at the long-term impacts. So we don't have all those answers yet. But
Right. Well, see, that's kind of where I'm leading, is just trying to bring in some ideas here, because one of the things that has been asked for from the port for years is to, do a snapshot of your utility increases. Take a 5-year snapshot in the past, look ahead 5 years, and say, okay, well, we're going to expect this could be the average for the next 5 years, 10 years. So we know that the increases are going to have to go up to that just to satisfy where you're at today. So all that's going to have to take into account before this goes much further.
Yeah, some of those increases, so we have had a significant increase in revenue at the hoist dock. So some of those increases could possibly be absorbed there, although we got improvements we got to do over there too. But this year we don't have the numbers yet on what this year looks like, but it looks like it's going to be even bigger, even more to what we did last year. Last year we were up by about 30% or so, which was around in the neighborhood of about 130,000, or it was around 100,000, I think is what it was. So we might have some room in there. We've also moved some funds around. We might be able to grab a hold, but I mean, as you pointed out, costs are going to increase everywhere. It's not just that it's going to continue going up. I do believe that we got room spending wise. I think we can spend money in a smarter fashion where we can cut our spending and cut some costs that would have an impact. So,
Sarah?
it is a, feedback kind of meeting for sure, so everything's very much wanting to be listened to. But I like the idea of just the concept of where did my money go? At least with this kind of thought process, your money is going to go to fix the electrical on the dock. It isn't going to be South Beach needs picnic tables or anything like that.
So this is, I guess I should have said up front, I really like this approach better than what we went through with the last budget and the last general manager, where we just got stuff sprung on us after he decided what he was going to do, and there wasn't really any, like you're saying, what's this money going to go to? So I think this is great to have this conversation, but I'm really interested in hearing from the people that are at Port Docs 5 and 7 and what they think.
Yeah, on that previous slide that just went away,
yeah.
you talk about the percentage change, the cumulative percentage. Year 1 you have a 10% change, and then year 2 you have a 20% change. Now is that a change of the end result of the first year's 10% change?
Yeah. So the compounding, that's what the bottom one represents. The top one is based on that 10, 20, and 35% is based on that 418, 174. So it's based on year 0. The bottom one is
the bottom one is the compounded interest.
So
the other one's simple interest.
So the way it would have to work is that it wouldn't actually be a 20% increase in year 2, from the previous year, it would be less than that. I don't know if that follows, but it would be, if you look at the previous year's revenue, it would be something less than 20% because you'd probably get more revenue from your.
It would have been 20% of the original, not
Right, yeah.
of the new.
It's on the far right, the 10, 18, and 20.
Yeah, there you go. Karen put it in there. So
And I've heard several guys that have had mortgage in this community for long periods of time have bought boats and brought them into town, and they haven't been told they couldn't tie there.
yeah,
They've just been told they can't have annual mortgage.
right.
And so is that based on this? I mean, they're not telling them they can't tie there, and they're going to be there all year, but they're just not allowed annual mortgage. That almost sounds like.
Yeah, and I think that's so. The idea behind that, I think, is that you would try to discourage people from crowding the docks too much. But I don't know how effective it is, because, like you said, the boats are still coming in, and they're still tying up. So,
Well, people live here,
Yeah.
I mean, if they buy a boat and they've been moored in this facility for 25, 30 years or even more, then they're gonna bring their boat here.
right,
Where they live.
and that's a demonstration of that idea. Like I was saying, that mortgage revenue is fairly secure. It's steady, because people are going to come here, So, but yeah.
Other questions from people at the table?
Well, I just noticed that we have fewer places to tie than we did 20 years ago, but yet we have more people. I don't understand how that works. I was told 40 years ago that there was no annual mortgage, no room for it. And we went 10, 15 years before I even got that. Now, what was that about? It's too confusing. I don't quite.
It'd be interesting to see the number of boats that have the different mortgages
Yeah.
year to year in a table or.
Well, the biggest problem I've seen is we have more linear feet of annual mortgage holders than we have linear feet of dock. And that's what it boils down to, is why I haven't been given any more annual mortgages out, because we don't have room for somebody getting a big discount for tying their boat up for a year. I mean, we have a few spots in the 32 to 36 foot range, but when it gets bigger than that, when it gets up to 40 foot and above, there's just no more room. I mean,
But we're not telling them they can't come. We're just telling them you got to pay more.
right.
Sarah, isn't that pretty relatively common up and down the coast? Like this over mortgage on the linear foot available other ports?
I don't know. I never asked other ports that specific question, but I know that they do double book spots in some places, and that's basically what it comes down to. We're overbooking the marina. So there are times when you're going to come in and you're going to look to get a spot, and it's not going to be there because we overbook it. Which, at the end of the day, devalues your mortgage a little bit, because you can't offer somebody a guarantee that they're going to have a spot. You can say, well, you're probably going to have a spot. Probably. And, if you don't, then you have to make do. And so it makes it, you can't charge as high of a rate because you can't guarantee the spot. It's more of like a,
What does make do mean? What do you do?
Side tie to somebody.
Side tie.
Fish plants, Swede
Yeah.
stock,
stuff like that.
porpoise.
Until somebody moves.
But, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask the audience if they had questions or comments.
With the grant revenue, the idea here is we would still pursue grant revenue if we can get it. But like I said, basing funding of a project on grant revenue, it's not going to be it's not going to be as much of a certainty it's going to come to pass, because you might not get the revenue. So you want to be able to have some money there, so that if the grant doesn't come to pass, you got some funding source. And I think some of those ideas that you brought up about partnering with other people, either the city or the county or anybody else, are good. They also do still, when you have the most amount of control over whether or not it costs you more. If you want to do something in 3 years and you have to rely on somebody else to do it, you lose some of that control. So it's possible that it may not come to pass. Yeah, go ahead.
So we're at the port are always going to be looking for grants for projects. And so if this, in any form, gets set aside, could it, in a grant situation, be used as matching funds at all?
Yeah, and that's what I would prefer, because what I want to do is, what I would rather do is keep these service life extension projects going, because there's more of them that still need to be done yet. And so what I'd like to be able to do is, but it needs to go directly, I think, back into the commercial marina for two reasons. That's who's paying for it, and then the second reason is that happens to be one of our biggest areas of need right now. I think it's one of the most critical. So.
Well, and I thought one of the most important things that Todd Kimball said at the last commission meeting was there is no port on the West Coast that does not use grants to sustain them. So, yeah, you've had a bumpy road over a year's period of time, and but I think the port is back on the right footing, and I suspect that if you concentrate on grant writing for a variety of things from a variety of sources, and you partner with the city, you partner with the county, you partner with the industry, you're going to be attractive to folks that are handing out that money. And then also don't just go to the usual sources. I mean, there are a lot of places, a lot of pots of money out there. If there's something that has to do with safety, there's places, and this is a safety issue. If there's something that has to do with the environment, you can look toward environmental groups and others that hand out grants. I mean, there's just so many different places to go after money. So I think that should be a part of everything. And then using some of the port's money or rate money as leverage or match or whatever is good. But you're going to be much more attractive the more people, and maybe you lose a little in timing and you lose a little bit in control. But the more groups that are signed on and working together, the more attractive you are to funders, because it shows a collaborative approach.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So let's go to the audience. Does anyone have questions or comments in the audience?
Do you want to see the rest of the slides first, or do you want to?
If you guys are on a tight time, that's okay too. So.
No, let's go through the slides. Thanks, Karen. I forgot.
We already kind of talked about this one. It's kind of a staple for the port. It's not as volatile. It's a bit more stable. And that's the main thing. Is I wanted to ask, what are the impacts to users of the port? One of the particular groups of people I'm concerned about is the salmon trawlers. And what is it? Does it impact them to a disproportionate degree? And is it a good idea in general? It would be a new way of doing things for us. And I have heard from other ports that are currently, they're wrestling with the same thing. They're trying to raise rates and not being successful, and they're trying to figure out a way to fund infrastructure projects. If we figure out a way to solve that puzzle by, assigning it, and it's something that people are able to buy into, it's an example for others to follow. So that's about all I had. So.
Anybody in the audience have a comment or question?
One question on the electrical, I didn't bring it back then. So by losing 8 pedestals, does that have anything to do with trying to upgrade to the 50 amp? Is it because of an amp load on the docks? Is that affecting that?
No, that's just to cut over with the same service we got and the same loads that we have right now, just to go from the old structure
so
to
even
the
if we stayed at 30, we would lose 8 pedestals. So if you go at 50,
it's not 8 pedestals, it's just 8 outlets.
4 pedestals.
Yeah, eight breakers.
But there's some on every circuit, basically.
Right, so like it'd be 1 pedestal for each finger.
Something like that. More or less, yeah.
But is it like going to 50 amp, you're going to put more stress on the whole system anyway, and they're going to cut you back further then if that was at the rate?
So if we go to 50 amp, it would include upgrades to all the conductors. And so this project right here would include upgrades to all the conductors. Our electrical engineer for the Port Dock 5 pier, he felt like it's going to max out the transformer's already maxed out, so it would require a new transformer. But I talked to the engineers at PUD and they disagreed. So they said they think that what's upland is sufficient, and it's just a matter of putting in the 50 amp conductors and the 50 amp circuits, and you're up and running. So
you'd have to change the wire.
We would have to change the wires. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is currently down there, is it single phase 208 down there? Do you have that?
I don't have it off the top of my head.
Yes?
No.
So 110?
110 single phase.
Yeah.
110. In your 50 amp circuit, are you talking about going up to 208?
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
Single or 3 phase? Or do you have it?
3 phase. Yeah.
Terry?
So
since I've been here since the Ice Age.
3 phase, that's a major
Back years
That's
ago,
huge.
when South
Grab
Beach
pumps.
was in deep trouble, the north side chipped in money to help them get through it. When NOAA came in, they said, okay, we need to back off. And then when they get making money, they're going to help the north side. What's the status of those other groups in relationship to helping out now with the maintenance problems over here?
So as far as South Beach goes, we have similar problems over there. So for example, we got to redo the load centers, which are all original equipment that feed the docks down there. And I just got an estimate back. We budgeted this year to do 3 of them, and we figured it was going to be about I think it was $30,000. It came in at $200,000, and we got to do 9 of those. So I have to go back and rebid that project and see if I can get that number down somehow or another. But that's just one thing that we got over there. If you look at the docks themselves, we got a lot of creosote pilings in there that are getting bad. You got to be replaced. As far as NOAA goes, our financial analysis that came from our advisor, our financial consultant, he believes that we're not putting enough away in the reserves for NOAA to cover maintenance for the rest of the time period, the rest of the life on that facility. So we are definitely behind the 8 ball, I think, in all. I mean, if we had a surplus someplace to cut it over, it'd be a great idea. But I don't, as SAC figured up all the projects that I think are must-dos in the next 5 and then 10 years, and it's a considerable amount all around the entire port.
But I think to Terry's question about is the revenue sliding back and forth and helping other projects from one side of the bay to the other? Was that your
Well,
question?
I see that it slid from the north side to the south side.
Right.
I just haven't seen the return back.
Yeah, well, so South Beach is the biggest generator of revenue today, and so that money, we're not using money in a way that is specific to where it's generated, and so that money goes into the general operations pot and helps out the commercial marina and the terminal or any other operation that needs to. And so we'd like to get to the point where we have cost centers for each of our enterprise units, which would be the commercial marina, the terminal, South Beach, because NOAA has to, as Aaron just said, we've got to continue to dump money into the reserve fund so that that facility doesn't get into a situation like we're talking about right now with infrastructure that's fallen apart and no funds to take care of it. We're required to do that by the lease, and so we're trying to do that. And so right now we're in a situation, as I think Aaron just mentioned, that no business unit or cost center or enterprise unit, however you want to refer to it, is generating enough money to pay for the operations and take care of these huge infrastructure projects that we have that should have been taken care of a number of years ago on a regular basis. So the money is moving around. It's not like we're taking $100,000 or $500,000 from South Beach and plugging it into the commercial marina specifically, but it's helping just with day-to-day operations and projects.
Do you have any numbers on what NOAA is actually putting out back to the port dollar-wise?
I don't have it on top of my head, but we can get you that.
Because, if they're supporting the port also, we need to know how much they're supporting us.
Right.
We don't want to do that for nothing.
Yeah, I think it's probably in our audit. I just don't, it's not in my brain fresh, but.
Sarah? A lot of that NOAA stuff was, the nicest way to say it is underestimating the cost of dredging. As I understand it. Am I wrong there, Aaron?
Dredgings come in more frequently and a little bit more expensive than what was forecast. But what we're hoping this year, we used the cutter head down there this year and attained some depths that weren't previously attained, and the design depth. And so hopefully it will stay for us a little bit longer. But it's been every 2 or 3 years, I think, instead of on a 5-year cycle, which was what was expected.
Anybody else in the audience have a comment? Jeff?
Yeah, I think it's a great step in the right direction, putting restricted funds into maintenance of specific areas. I mean, this is something that I've heard asked for, and this is a step in the absolute right direction. So, good work. I have a question about that Port Dock 7 reconfiguration. Do you have any thoughts of the permitting difficulties behind that with DSL and ODFW, and is it too early for that?
Well, I could go into some of that detail. I don't know how much time everybody wants to, so it would take. It's a complex plan. I think it would take a lot to get the permitting to be able to do it, and it's a combination of a few different things. We need subtidal mitigation. We need some place to move some eelgrass around. And we're gonna and we're gonna have to and some of these mitigations. So the mitigation is for the removal fill, because we'd be adding pilings and we'd be adding square footage of docks, which is shading over the water. So we'd have to compensate for that somehow. We also need to rebuild the public fishing pier down at South Beach. That's going to be a really big project, which generates absolutely no revenue for us. So why would we want to undertake that? If we can redesign it in a way, and I've talked to the Army Corps a little bit about this, but if we could redesign it in a way that capitalizes on the existing breakwater in South Beach and extend the pathway out there, and then build a shorter pier off of the end of that breakwater. The breakwater has to be improved first, which would be on the Army Corps. And you can extend it out further past the end of the pier. It creates a pier that over the water structure. It's about a third as big as the existing one. So we get something like, and that the existing pier is like 12,000 square feet and 148 pilings. So we would get a lot of that back, and we would be able to cover the additional shadowing over the water and the pilings in the water in the commercial marina. We got to fund that project though too. But that is a way to bring value to that project, so we can get that pier replaced, and we don't just lose it.
Gary and then David.
It seems to me on the public pier, that's something that funding should become more from the state or the city.
That's right.
Than the port.
Yep, that's right.
Public thing.
We think the Marine Board will be. We think the Marine Board will be interested in partnering with us on that.
There's a lot of partnering opportunities for it.
Right.
So
I don't see why the port should be picking up that bill.
State parks.
We'll get the pilings to use, but the bill side.
David and then Terry.
Yeah, the public fishing pier is an interesting thing. It's a whole animal of all its own. And the last time we went through this, when the end of the dock burned off, the port was told to replace it or fix it, and we took the stance that we were just going to shut it down. Well, there was no way that was going to happen. I mean, there was the public outcry and everything else was just tremendous. So it turned out to be a city, county, and state project. It wasn't a port project. So I wouldn't, you're going to really be going uphill on this one if you try and remove it or change it. The public's really in tune to that, but I'm just saying that last time it was replaced, it wasn't done by the port.
Well, the port did have a lot of labor involved.
They did have labor involved.
So there wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, I think
the funding is there.
In-kind stuff.
But to try and change the footprint of that or do anything different with it, we were going to shut it down. We weren't allowed to do that.
Terry?
Two things. First of all, David's right that there's an advantage to you pulling that and changing the configuration, because that gives you a whole lot of pilings that can be then used in a more prudent manner and not lose the access to the fishing industry. He's absolutely right. There's money for that kind of project through the tourist industry and through the other regions that aren't qualified under the port or wouldn't have to pay for by the port. On the Port Dock 7 project, I looked at your configuration and you haven't got the room, because without dredging outside of that mud flat, I fish herring through there all the time, and that mud flat is not like down at Port Dock 5, it doesn't come straight off. It's banded over there. Right now, there's not a lot of room when you go by the outside of that boat, if you're in a deep water boat, to get through there. So if you're going to extend like you projected, You're gonna have to have some kind of drainage plan.
That's right. So I got some
Aaron's
stuff.
got a plan.
I got some stuff on that too. So part of what we got to do is, and this is something else I've talked to the Army Corps, and I was very surprised that they were receptive to it. But if we can establish a federal project in the commercial marina, we can get a channel cut -20 that would get you into Port Dock 7. So that kind of clears a little bit of room out in front of Port Dock 7 or along the bay side of it. It also takes a large chunk of the dredging that would need to occur in order to get the larger boats room in there. We've got a survey that was done in '92, I think it was, where they used a jet probe to go down and find hardpan, and it was hardpan is down a lot deeper than what I thought. But as far as the berths go, yeah, we have to figure out a way to fund the dredging of the berths. We got to do that anyway. It's going to be because there's a lot of shoaling in there as it is.
When you say larger boats, what do you mean by size?
So anything that we would be able to accommodate anything with it's a -20 channel. And if you look at that side tie space, we would want to put in some good shore tie in there for boats up to, 80 feet or so. Something like that.
100 feet.
Or 100 feet, yeah.
So Jim, did you have your hand up?
Oh, I was just wondering if that public pier became a county or state or city project, would the port still get mitigation credit for that to use on Port Dock 7?
We could still get it.
We did.
It's going to be. I only like bringing it up because I recognize like that.
People want it.
It's going to be it's really tough, but I think it depends on how you talk about it and how it gets it really does. Aside from mitigation, it brings an absolute environmental benefit to the estuary because we're removing. That's a lot of creosote pilings, and it removes a lot of shading over the top of the water, but still gives the public access to people that they crave. And we got to do something with it because if you haven't gone out on it in a while, take an afternoon and walk out on that thing and just look at it.
With a life jacket.
It's another one of these projects that's got to get done in the next 10 years, the next 5 years. I mean, those pilings are in terrible shape. But, if we bring partners into it, just like what you were saying before, we might be, but it'd be tough.
So let's circle back to,
You just close it. That's what you have to do. If it comes to the point where it's unusable, you close it, then it becomes somebody else's animal. Because then people will come to you and say, what can we do to get this open here?
Yeah.
let's circle back to the project that Aaron brought to us and the thought about raising fees. I mean, obviously you're not expecting right now that people are going to sign off on that.
No.
You know, this is the first that people are hearing about it. I did note one of your bullet points that talked about, will this impact some people disproportionately? I think that's a slippery slope to go down, because every fishing business, if it's small or large, has inputs and outputs. I think that it's all relative.
Yeah.
So I don't, that makes me a little, I don't know about that.
On that subject of relativity, I think about, you had a slide up there with the 60-foot boat and it being, even with all the increases, $4,000 or $4,500 a year. Probably your average 60-foot boat, that's less than 1% of its, generated capital for the year for moorage. But you go to a salmon trawler, the percentage of their annual gross could be considerably more taken up by the moorage. I'm not trying to be argumentative, but
no, that's a
some of
good
those guys don't have a lot of
especially
money?
with the seasons the
Opportunity.
way they are right now. Yeah.
Kent, are there a lot of latent trawlers in the marina there, to ones that don't operate, that just sit there and?
There's not a whole lot of them now. I mean, we've over the course of the few years we've burned them, and most of those those slips there that they're in, they're 32 or 34 foot slips there, and so we still have some of that size available. So it's not really affecting those boats per se. I mean, it's just we still have room for that size there. So I don't know.
Well, when you reconfigure, you're going to lose
most
some.
of those guys are still. Most of them are still fishing. I don't think there's very many that aren't doing something during the course of the year.
No, that's good.
John, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was wondering, have you had an opportunity to see how these rate increases compare with some of the other ports up and down the coast?
Yeah, I haven't taken. Well, I know generally where we're at right now. It's going to make us even higher. It's going to be an expensive place to be.
Well, I know Warrenton and Charleston, most of those ports, of course, they have their fleets aren't nearly as big as ours, but they have assigned stalls.
Yeah.
And but
They also don't have the same things available to them up here that a fisherman
no,
has
they don't. You're right.
here.
They have a work dock in Warrenton. They have access to 220. A lot of those guys use the same cords the guys plug into in Kodiak.
But that's why I wanted to, because we wouldn't want to try and do that, and then all of a sudden people are like, you know what, I'm just going to go someplace. We don't want to have that happen either. That's why I think it's important to talk about, because
So what's the process now, Aaron? Are you wanting people to go out and gather some feedback from their colleagues, and we'll have another meeting as the budget process starts up, or?
I think so. How do you think that fits in the budget process?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have public work sessions where we talk about the budget, and I think we would want to make sure that those of you that want to have input on these kinds of conversations are aware of when those meetings are and sort of what we're focusing on, because this is an iterative process, right? And we have to figure out how to solve these enormous problems. You know that better than anybody, folks. And so, we're trying to step into this in a manner that can make sense for everybody.
So does the committee want to make any kind of recommendation right now to the commission that they continue to vet this approach with the impacted users, or something along those lines, and bring it up in a future commercial fishing users committee? Or what do you guys, especially the people that are paying the rates?
Well, I support the court's process in this. I think it's great. I think it's it's better than the port just coming up and the rates and fees and saying we're going to adjust the fees to 5%. You don't know where it's going to. Next year they raise it 10%. You don't know where it's going to. This is identifying that it's staying in this area. It is identifying that it's staying in this project. I think that's a great approach. I just hope that the port can do the due diligence to bring it out in a little better format to show that the port can afford to do it that way.
Right.
That you can stay in operation. So, right now these numbers are great, but it's not showing the bottom line what the port needs for management.
Right,
also. So,
right. This is just very conceptual at this point.
So I support it personally. I think as an export commissioner, I think this is a great approach. I've never, really thought down this line of reserve funds. I think it's great.
I just would like to say that Aaron has done well in analyzing this stuff, and this is an initial thing, just it's proven out in the night shift for offloading. That's just been a boom for revenue for the port, using that little voice.
I would say to that it has also been really a great service to the fishing community of docks 5 and 7. Being able to have more use of the unloading dock, and you guys working with us and getting us that overtime that we need, even with Kevin and everything going on with his wife. The people that are working at the port, the new employees, have really stepped up. They've filled in those spots. They've covered those shifts. And so there's been kind of no gap, really. It's been a nice streamline. Everyone has worked together, which years of working at that dock, I haven't always seen that. So I'm really feel positive about the new hiring that they've done in that way. The people seem like Aaron did a good job finding people that were on board to be team players kind of for the whole process that we have going on there. And I think it's benefited the port, and it's benefited the fishing community here in Newport as well to kind of boom the business over there. So I'm really happy with that. And I also appreciate that what you've done with the reserve fund, and that you're trying to be so transparent with us and show us exactly where money's going, and that we have some assurity that it's going to get spent on these projects that didn't happen in the past. Money wasn't put in the pools that it should be. So I really commend that.
Thanks.
So, committee, do you want to take that approach? Because we will be submitting a report to the commissioners that we appreciate the transparency, we want to be involved, we think this is worth continued vetting, or are there people against it? Or
I have no problems with it. Sounds good to me. Definitely like it. It's better, other than having it shoved down our throats.
Yeah. Bob, what do you think?
Well, I think it's good. At least we can go with an explanation to people that are mortgage holders and explain what is happening and why. And I'm sure that nobody will realize there's not a problem. They already know there is.
Well, maybe next meeting we'll have more information and we can make a better educated decision.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
When is the next, when does the budget committee start really formalizing the plans?
Well, the commission meets April 9th for a budget work session to talk about priorities. And the budget committee, that formal committee, doesn't really meet until May. But between the first part of April and when that committee meets in May, there's a lot of discussion going on about the budget. I would suggest that this group get together again somewhere in that time frame, mid-April to mid-May, so that we could talk more about sort of some concrete numbers, and we'll have a little more research done and understand the bigger picture, and also to share with you the capital plan looking forward. I mean, that's really part of our strategic business plan. And on the 20th of March, we have a work session at noon and then an open house that afternoon at 4. And to really understand sort of, these are some first steps into, that Aaron's been talking about, into bigger, the bigger plan for the future of Port Dock 5 and 7, and how that relates to, other business going on within the port, and the price tag for all that, and how we're planning to strategize about partnering with lots of other entities for grants and other kinds of funding partnerships. Because trust me, we understand that when we partner, we're a much stronger ask for funds, and we've been looking at all kinds of options for that. So it's just about getting that all lined up. So I think it would make sense for us to come back and have more, don't you think, solid sort of numbers and ideas about long-term impact financially somewhere in the mid-April sort of time frame.
Okay, I think that sounds good. Should we wrap this agenda item up and keep going? Okay.
Can I have one last comment real quick?
Yeah.
On mitigation and stuff, who's in charge of that dock out by the LNG tank?
That is ours. We were just out there the other day talking about it. The truck. So yeah, that's ours.
Is that something that could be removed to get piling?
Yeah, but it only gives us 6 pilings and but it definitely, that's a prime one that needs to go, and I'm ready to get it.
That one should have never been built.
Yeah, I want to tie it into. The problem with mitigation is it has to be tied to a permit for a project. So we're waiting for an opportune moment to get that thing out of there.
Good.
That's a dock over a mud flat.
Yeah, it is. It's always stymied me when they built that.
It's a time dock.
Okay, Sarah has a question, and then we're going to move on.
Quickly, where would you like, I'd like to think that people are going to think about this before April and go, hey, I really want this question answered in our next meeting. Should they go through Heather? Should they go through you, Aaron? Or, just like I was thinking about that, and I was wondering about this, and could you tell us in April? I would like to think people put more thought into it for questions.
Yeah,
I think it should go through Heather, just because of the,
Don't look so happy.
the format. Well, I just think if you could just accumulate things and then, we can be more productive if we get a group of questions together, because they no doubt will relate to each other.
Yeah, and that's everyone's job on the committee to extract those from other people.
Everybody has my contact information. Okay, so let's move on to the next agenda item. The next one is the use of the international terminal. If you recall, at our last meeting, we met at the Yacht Club. We talked about how we could accommodate a potential smaller shipping operation at the terminal that Stephen Brothers had brought to the port. We were excited about that and thought we could make it work. We put that back over to the port, and we took that back to Stephen Brothers. I don't know that they've provided you any additional feedback. So this isn't really about one specific shipping deal, but in 2017, we had put together, the industry had put together a document that's in your packet that talked about how the terminal was used and what to consider in moving forward with any other deals at that mixed-use facility. We talked about at our last meeting a few months ago, updating that document. And so the document that you have in your packet is actually the old one from 2017. I've talked with a lot of people individually about how to update the document, and I did a draft here that I will pass copies out. With that, I have 25 copies, so there will be enough to give some people in the audience copies. Basically, what it does is updates the numbers that were in the previous one, and then describes how the terminal is used. So the reason it's important to update this is the other one was out of date, but also because of the House bill that's circulating in Salem right now, the proponents of that bill, the proponents of the port being taken over by the governor appointing the commissioners, have been passing around the older document with no context, saying, look at the fishing industry, they're just demanding complete use of the space and they're not sharing it. And they're doing that, of course, in a misleading way, but also people that are hearing that, they don't understand what the terminal is or how it is used. So the job is to just identify how the fishing industry has traditionally used that terminal, and also identify some of the new activities that are happening there. So I think all the shrimp gear has been moved up there, right? We've got unloading of crab during the season when the hoist is backed up at the terminal, and there's just been, the port has moved some activities up there, in addition to the fact that fisheries have been doing really well for the most part. Salmon maybe not so much, but a lot of the other ones growing and more activity. And then we have the 3 shipyards that are operating up the river, 2 in Toledo, 1 halfway up at Kevin Hills. And you have transient boats as well as local boats that are staging at the terminal before heading up there. So at the bottom are bullet points that talk about some of these different things. And I tried to capture, I didn't put an end date on crab season. I think that's different every year. Correct me if I'm wrong. But for anybody that's using the terminal right now, I want to make sure that they're captured in this. And so what this is not a demand, which is how the proponents of HB 2284 have described it. What it is an inventory of what's going on there. And it's an encouragement to the commission, keep these things in mind when you're looking at deals that can work out at the terminal for shipping, and see how they can fit in with what's happening there. And that's what the port's been going after and doing. And so this is just more of an inventory, so you can say, well, this is what's happening there. Previously, we asked the port to endorse the platform. They didn't. Maybe with this approach, you can take this and update an operations plan for the terminal. I'm not sure what the next steps there would be, but we were asked to update this. I committed to you at the last meeting that we would, and now we want to finalize it right now so that we're not having a serial meeting outside of this meeting, right? We have to obey public meeting laws. So if you have input into it, or it needs to be changed, you need to let's talk about it. So is it capturing, how the shrimpers use the terminal?
Well, you've missed one thing, and
Okay.
it caught my eye immediately. You've got, in March, the shrimp vessels are changing out the gear for an April 1 start. But you also have the month of November when we're stripping the shrimp gear and loading our crab gear.
Okay.
Or putting, we can use the other hoist down at the main dock, but
So
to get our shrimp gear off, our doors, our
shrimp
nets,
gear.
our hopper, our outriggers all come off in November after shrimp season.
Okay. And then that's all stored up there now?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then loading crab pots, that was a big, so I
That's
guess.
November also. Usually, I don't.
Well, I guess it depends on when the season starts, right?
Well, yeah, but guys are still preparing to do it in November. That would be a normal time, but
Okay.
They're stacking
I don't use the place. It'd be
Yeah.
more of a question for Gary or somebody else that actually uses it.
I know, I was there on a Sunday and the place was full of crab pots and the only person there was Gary. By himself, loaded pots. So, yeah, Gary, talk to me about the crab stuff.
Well, I mean, anywhere from the middle of late October on, that whole area is, and especially this year, was extremely crowded. You know, we started using that several years ago for our operation because it wasn't crowded. Well, then everybody else caught on what we were doing, and there's less areas to store gear at fish plants. Used to be able to store the gear at the fish plants real heavy, and that has gone away because of their operations, of the hake operation, the groundfish operations. Later on, are going later, okay? So they're processing, there's a place to store gear. So that's become an extremely, especially in the last 2 years, heavily used area.
So with the rationalized fisheries and the seasons that get longer, processing goes instead of
Right.
6-week pulse, it goes out
Absolutely.
through the year and takes up that space.
And then work for our operation, for our groundfish operation in the summertime, we're using that area real heavy with one of our vessels switching over from black cod to groundfish. We're switching one boat several times during the year. So we're using that pretty much year round for us.
Hey, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
So I had always kind of figured that the number of pots, in general, the Dungeness pots that are here, is fairly static because of permits. Is that right, or is it? Have you guys seen it going up? Is it increasing, or is it decreasing, or what?
Seems like it's increasing every year. It seems like every year there's one or two more boats, and one or two more boats is another 1,000 pots.
Okay.
You know, and it doesn't take very many boats to really start seeing a big increase.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
And it seems to be, especially in our area, the upgrading, you know, we're 300 pot permits. Guys have sold their operation, or sold their 300, seeked out 500 pot permits. We've had a fairly substantial upgrade in our fleet.
A lot of them are upgrade. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they're getting.
I don't know if there must
responses.
be a decrease in other fleets, you know, in other ports because those permits are moving. But it seems like the 500 pot permits are getting more and more in this fleet. So we're losing more and more. We have more and more space needed.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
the data actually supports what you're saying in terms of, if you look at Newport and the income that's generated, the earned income off commercial fishing, it continues to grow. In fact, it's almost as much as all the other fishing ports in Oregon combined. And the other ones are dipping so
Right.
people are either moving here, they're expanding here, they're
It's
growing their
combination of both.
businesses here, but that's what the data actually is supporting. So is there a way that the port you're charging rental space, right, for all those pots that are staged up there? And how does that work?
23 cents a square foot.
And you measure it every day, or how?
Well, if you go by the pallet, each pallet is X square feet, just
I see.
counting the stacks, basically,
Is that on a daily basis, or how's that?
monthly.
Monthly.
So I would expect you'll probably see us get a lot tighter in the future on when inventories are taken, because we got, people figured that out and they're getting in and
work
out.
around that pretty well.
Because when I saw that the revenue had been increasing every year at the terminal for services, but then the last one, it dipped when there's been more activity up there than ever. It just didn't.
We haven't figured that out yet. Don't know
Yeah.
yet. But the inventory thing is something that, anyway, we'll have to figure it out.
I mean,
it's not something Don can do probably by, it's because he just, and that's why the monthly, but anyway, we'll figure it out.
But there has been this, especially this last year, was substantial amount of increase in pots. I mean, in our operation alone, there's 1,000 sitting there.
Yeah.
And this year, there was, I don't know, there was,
Thousands.
I mean, I don't know, Don could maybe
It
have
was
it.
like, I don't know, I had like 5,000 pots up there.
I was gonna say
around there.
at least 5,000
About
pots.
nine different vessels. Not all of them had 500 pot permits or 500 pots, but around that number.
Right.
I think a lot of that, don't you think a lot of that has to do with the uncertainty of when the season's gonna open?
Oh, absolutely. So this year, I mean, especially like the year before, we even delayed even longer. That gear sat there for even longer, so that increased our cost, but also increased with the revenue from the port.
And all those pots would have been sitting where in years past?
In our place, I have a storage facility.
So at people's
The gear yard.
gear
People's
sheds,
homes, yeah.
at processing plants, on the port property where the office is. There's a lot of pots there.
Mostly away from town.
Our gear's out of town.
Yeah, a lot of people keep it at their houses, and then when it's time, you stage them in town wherever you can
Okay.
for the go, you know.
And that's a consideration when we talk about storage rates. I know when I decided to buy property, it was obvious all I needed was a down payment. I'm already paying enough storage fees to pay for this property. All I need is a down payment, and the property's mine at the end of it. So as we raise storage rates, you're going to have more exodus from the facility.
We bought property the same
It's
way
just
because of that.
That's why I did it.
We all bought property.
Pots are real
Taste
predictable.
Still-
I mean, they're gonna get near the boats as the season, whether it gets delayed or not, nobody knows. And so, irregardless of them being out of town at some point in November, they're gonna be staged in town. And everybody's gonna do it every year with all their pots.
I don't see a decrease at the terminal on craft gear sitting up there in the future.
Okay. What other activities are any of you doing up there that's not captured here that we haven't just talked about?
The change in the midwater nets is that the rockfish fishery is open, so there's midwater nets throughout the season, throughout the year.
Instead
when-
of May 15th and on.
Yeah, and when the crab pots are out is when we have all our nets out, getting ready for race season and stuff. So it's very used up there.
Yeah, and it captures that in November through January.
Yeah.
March is a big month for everybody stretching their shrimp gear out.
That's on here.
Well, I don't have stretching gear out.
It says changeovers.
Yep.
We started yesterday.
You started yesterday.
Yeah, stretching shrimp nets out.
David.
You know, the emphasis on this is really is that the port has shrunk as far as the commercial industry goes, or commercial fishermen. Losing Port Dock 2 was a big deal when we lost Port Dock 2 because of NOAA. That hurt. I mean, there was a lot of staging that went on at Port Dock 2. A lot of us had dumped gear over there. Our gear would be trucked right down to the South Beach Marina. And before Rogue Ale and before dry camping, that was a repair area. Used it consistently all the time. Now we're out of that area. That's gone now. We can't use that. Port Dock 2's gone. We can't use Port Dock 2. That was taken out. So the world for commercial fishing has shrunk. And even at Port Dock 7, when we lost Port Dock 3 due to heavy weather in November, the insurance money from that went to extending the dock at Port Dock 7 from its original footprint, extended it out, put new cranes on it. Even that is out of use for most of the vessels now. There's so much competition and so much use of that dock. So everything continues to move to the next area, and that's kind of where we're at now. We're kind of digging in and saying, look, these areas are gone to us now, and so we need more room. And so that's kind of the emphasis where we're ending up here now is saying, these services are desperately needed by us.
Do you have an update on the Rondes property?
I see Evan snuck in after we did introductions. He might be willing to be put on the spot, or you have an update on?
Another day, things are moving along. We're trying to get warehouses out there, hopefully by the end of summer. Probably it'd be in the range of 30,000 square feet. 4 different buildings. It's the same. We're going for the same program that I presented to you guys here end of last year. Aside from that, still trying to find other opportunities for the property.
Yeah, your sign has a whole bunch of stuff on there. So, Aaron, that reminds me, I heard something about an ice barge or some kind of operation up at the terminal, or?
That'd probably be more of a question for, we don't have any plans for that. We got to talk to Rhonda's today about a few different things, and but I don't really have any. The port's not planning on that, but Rhonda's, maybe that would be something they could take up if they saw fit. So.
Is that any comment on?
And ice plant's another opportunity we're trying to develop. I would hope, we're trying to get that started this summer. That's another one. And I need to talk with the board more exactly how it'll play next to the NIC. But yeah, that's.
So is that on land or on a barge?
It's going to be on land.
There is an ice shortage, I know that, in town, so. Okay, any other comments? Does anybody in the audience have comments or an activity that happens at the terminal that's not captured?
Yeah.
Oh,
I just think that it's going to be the port's job to realize these uses and the new platform, but to also, we're trying to thread the needle on, will there be room on the big dock for shipping? So there's uses throughout the year, we realize, but when is it that the whole dock is being used? It's the most critical, and that's just something that the port will have to constantly figure out.
Well, I don't think that's a secret. The whole dock is
Right,
used.
and it's in the platform.
Right. December 1st through January 10th. And
Right, but some of the spring and summer stuff isn't a whole fleet.
And that's on here, actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're at the second bullet point.
So if
talks
there's no
about
change in that, continue to tell us when the whole dock more fishy oriented.
Yeah, and my understanding is the port has been following up on looking for any kind of opportunities to ship within the limited space. Yeah, within the space that we have. And we support that, and we hope that if you have other proposals that come forward, you bring them to us. And what is the update from Shanti then?
At this point, there's no ongoing communication about it.
So they came back to you and just said, we're not interested? Or?
They didn't say that specifically, but they're not interested in furthering the conversation at this point.
Robert.
The ice barge, or the ice dock, is that gonna be in the east end of the terminals now, is where they're thinking of putting this thing?
Well, I don't know,
The ice
Ronnie's
equipment?
property is,
So it'll be on the terminals on the east end?
It wouldn't be on the terminals.
It wouldn't be, okay, it wouldn't be.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be on the terminals.
So they're gonna build a dock then, obviously.
It's
Right.
it'd be on Rhonda's property.
Oh,
We're
okay.
looking at the temporary float.
I see, all right. I just figured people losing their more dock space.
Carrie.
Just speaking for crap that was unloaded at the terminal, when you're looking at these things in here, I know that we unloaded quite a bit of crab over the dock there this year. I'm not sure what seawater did as well, but I would guess it's well over 500,000 pounds of crab was unloaded at the terminal this season. But that being said, we've appreciated using the property, and I think it's worked out really well in the interim while you're looking for something. And we're of course willing to work with anything that works out for the port in a revenue way. So if it's shipping, we'll be flexible with what's available to us when it's available to us, to what works for the port. But I have appreciated that the port has seen the revenue that could be made from unloading there and has let us use it rather than let the property sit open. And Dawn was also really open to it as well. And the guys there were like, we want to work here, so get us to work. And we appreciate that. But when you said what all happens there, we're not asking for anything out of that. Just willing to use it when it's available.
Well, and that worked out to be money for the port, but also it was two public ways basically going at the same time. You can get more product
Actually,
unloaded?
three. If we use that one, the other two are being used.
Right, so I guess what I'm saying is more product being unloaded quicker, people can get back out fishing and keep going.
There was actually large vessels that were able to unload there that we wouldn't have been able to unload at the other dock. So they were able to come to Newport and unload their catch when they would not have came to Newport to unload their catch. So it was something that we had made an agreement with Deang Seafood, and we had said from the beginning, if that's not available, we can't unload, like the Miss Sarah.
Okay, Gary?
I just wanted to reiterate what Dave's talking about with the lack of space, where before we had, down between 5 and 7, that was our main area of switching the boats over. And now with the independents coming in and buying product, if we need them here, for the competition to the ex-vessel price in town, that opportunity is basically almost gone away, almost completely. There's very little use there. We have 2 cranes there now that we don't even hardly ever use anymore for doing that. And so it's all been, so what I'm getting at is, it is really, the terminal has become a major, without that, then what's going on, either one's going to have to give. You're not going to be able to switch boats over, or we're going to lose the independent buyers in town. So you have to have that facility up there.
Okay. Okay, so I've got just a couple little things that I'll change to this. I'll add in the points about stripping off shrimping gear in November, late October, start staging crab pots, and then Gary mentioned stretching shrimp nets out starting in March, and then those are some of the bullet points that are missing, so I'll add those in. And then I'll finalize this and I'll present it to the Port Commission at their next meeting, which I think is March 26th. Does anybody have any other comments on that? We're going to have one more public comment period here at the end for things maybe that we didn't talk about, but before we do that, I wonder if I couldn't put Terry on the spot just for a moment. You did mention the strategic business plan, and I think we'll have a draft of that later this month or an open house about that. Can you give an update on the search for the general manager?
Sure. We are down to a group of semi-finalists that will be interviewed on the 18th of March. There'll be a public open house. The 18th is a Monday. There'll be a public open house the Sunday evening from 4 to 6 at the South Beach Activities Room where we hold the commission meetings.
St. Patrick's Day?
Yep.
You're going to have any?
No. No, we're not going to have any of that. We'll have water, these nice little water.
Green water.
And maybe green cookies. How's that? And that's an opportunity to meet and talk with the candidates. And the commission will have a meeting on the 19th, which is the Tuesday, to decide next steps. If they're going to do a conditional offer of employment to someone, or if they want to interview.
Is there a list of the semifinalists that's available?
It's not public due to the confidentiality of the applicants. That will be they will become public at the open house, but there won't be a list published.
How many are there?
I'm not at liberty to say that either.
Boy.
I've been advised.
Less than 100.
Well, I certainly hope we can find one this time that's willing to buy a home here, live in our community, get to understand our community, understand the commercial fishing industry, understand what makes this community work, because we've been lacking that in our last 2 managers.
I bought a home. I'm living
That's
here.
perfect. I'm just saying it'd be nice to get back to that point again, have somebody that's willing to interact with Salem and with the OPA and the waterways and stay in contact once again.
Well, ideally, it'd be someone who's already here, who's
Well, it'd be nice if somebody knows the community. But
doesn't have to start from scratch.
anyway, that's just a comment I wanted to make, because I just hope that someday we can get back to that.
Okay, so let's do the last public comment period. You can mention anything we talked about or anything that we haven't talked about.
Next
Steve
question,
Mark.
Jerry, how many candidates do you have?
I'm not at liberty to say how many semifinalists there are.
But how many totals applied to the?
We had 23 applicants in the second round. And it was I just have to say to your comment, David, it was an extremely port-specific, experienced group of folks. We had a number of...
23 of them?
Not all 23, but we had a number of highly qualified folks. Robert?
I just want to say, as a user of the terminals, how good a job that Don's doing for us up there. Since the last guy left, I already forgot his name. Don's really stepped in good. He juggles so much stuff up there. And whenever we need something done, boy, it gets taken care of. So he deserves a raise.
Thanks. So Mike pointed out to me that I forgot that I skipped over an agenda item about future agenda items. So while we're doing this public comment, if people have ideas for future agenda items beyond the budget stuff, or any other potential shipping operation deals that come forward, or if anybody from the audience has an idea about what they'd like to see this group discuss, just share that.
Where are we at on the ramp? The Dock 5 ramp? The walkway?
The pier?
The pier, yeah.
It's so we're waiting on the last letters of support will come from the federal delegation, and they should be in like in a week
They
or
should
so,
be
something like
in
that.
now,
And then we
but-
send a grant request out, and then we wait a couple months to see if we get the money. But other than that, it's ready to go. The only thing we haven't done is submit it for the city's building permit because you got to start moving on it within 6 months. It's not quite time for us to do that yet, and it's going to cost us about I think $16,000 somewhere in there. But anyway, that's where it's at. So hopefully we get the
$16,000 for the permit?
yeah.
Dietmar, can you do something?
Yeah, build a new house.
What permit was that?
It's for the building permit on the Port Dock 5 pier. It has to do with the value of the structure.
No, it was
and everything else.
11,000.
Mike?
This is for the building.
I was just going to throw out, most of the vessels that are up there at the terminal now started out as vessels that could have moored easily at Dock 5. One example would be Tommy Stamp's Miss Birdie, which is the same boat as your Lady K.
Yeah, Lisa Melinda, same thing.
Yeah, and those boats evolved into bigger boats. And when I see the evolution of the moorage facility that Aaron put on the screen from the 70s to today, it's almost unchanged, whereas our fleet is evolving. And not just in the number of boats, which appears to be increasing, particularly in the larger vessel sector, but the beam to length ratio of those boats is changing as well. So when I see the proposal for the Dock 5 and the wing replacement, even some of the smaller boats are sponsoring it and becoming, when you make reference to we have 32-foot spaces available or we have 46-foot spaces available. I mean, I have a 57-foot boat that's 15 feet wide, and if we just, if I get foolish enough to sponsor it, it's going to come back at 23, and it's not going to be able to sit in that stall anymore, and it's going to be out there competing out there on Dock 5 with the rest of them. And I don't know if there's being inside the breakwater, we're kind of in a finite little cage, and we might have too many gerbils here now, so maybe we need a new cage or another cage or something. If there's another place in this estuary where we could consider some moorage facilities, that would be awesome. And we should consider the beam to length ratio on these smaller boats and all the boats increasing as we go forward, because Dock 7 was built for salmon trawlers. A lot of those are wood boats that they're not building those boats anymore. And when they built those boats, they had low horsepowers and small, narrow boats that would move through the water efficiently. Now we're shoving these wide ones through with lots of horsepower. And we need to keep that in mind going forward, that we might need wider berths and not as many narrow berths.
I'll say something to that. When I drew that whole plan up there, a lot of those 50 and 60-foot slips that I added in there, I did make them a little bit wider, knowing that that's the way the industry's going already. So, and I also put in a lot less 32 34-foot slips compared to what we have now, because if you go down there now and look at those, about at least 40% of the boats or more are sticking out past the end of the fingers, up to 8 feet or so. So there's less of those slips and more, I've put in some more 40s and more 50s. And some of those would be assigned slips, so it would take a lot of pressure off of Dock 5, for instance, where you can still bring in bigger boats. You can get some of those 60-footers, 50, 60-footers out to Dock 5 or 7, and you can slide some of those other ones. And then there's also those 2 long side ties. And if that plan came together, you would be able to put at least 600-footers in there on, side ties into that big long side tie area.
Good point.
Mike brings up a good point. The way we assess the value of the boats, if I understand right, today is strictly on length.
Well, not strictly on length, but like Kent's explaining, we don't have a dedicated formula. You know what I mean? Like it's a reference point is the best way I can describe it. It's one of the many different ways, because the other problem, if you just look at length, then it negates the availability of stalls that are big enough for people.
Well, that's my point. You want revenue.
Yeah.
And actually, these guys, when I brought the Olympic around, they wouldn't let me have annual board, even though I've been here forever, and I was retiring another boat with 58 feet. Of course, they hesitated. Eventually, I got back the annual mortgage. But it seems like to me we have a situation where everybody's growing these bigger boats, but the assessment against you is on length only when you widen the boat and taking up more space. It seems like there is...
I'd love to do a square footage charge.
Well, I'm not saying not necessarily a square footage charge, but there's got to be a formula.
Displacement,
boat that's 20 foot goes to 40 foot, that's twice as big a boat, taking up twice as big a space in the port, but yet they're getting the price that they paid for the small boat. And it's throughout the fleet.
You can look at displacement. That would be one way to measure it, tonnage. But that would be a new thing for sure.
Well, it just boils down to we do have finite space in there, unless Dock 7 is obviously the next dock that really needs to be rebuilt, and then future down the road you might be able to look at improvements to Dock 5 and the way it's set up. But I think for now, if we can just do improvements on there, make it last another 20 years or so, or 25 years as it is, then we can kind of look at those options later down the road.
I think 25. See, to me, I think 20 years is too long. I think we got to get going on it faster than that myself. But that's all.
It's going to take a while to get Dock 7 set up.
Yeah.
Well, and there are some boats that just don't fit at 547 anymore, or at all.
I guess for a future agenda item, I do get input as a commissioner pretty often. I don't get a lot of anything, but is the fact that I can go to any other port on the west coast of America, and if I pull into a spot, there's an empty one, and a guy comes down and tells me, get the hell out of there, you're not supposed to be there. Some kind of, I don't know if it would help the fact that we don't have enough docks, but that there'll be small boats docking in a big space, and Newport is just, you just come in and pull into a spot if you're a transit vessel.
Well, we
So
do
maybe
go
an
down
agenda-
occasion and move boats out of the way.
Agenda item
I don't
might
know
be
how pressing it is for the whole fleet.
how that
Just
works.
get some input on that.
And the cost of it.
Yeah. Well, just how it works in general. How many boats do we have? What's the length of the boats that are, or whatever the space is? How much space do you have in each category, and then how many vessels and the length?
I
of
guess
those?
Aaron could just briefly, I mean, is there a big problem? Like I say, I get input from that. It's the only reason I mentioned
I do believe there's efficiencies to be had in moving boats to where they would fit better. It does have a cost to it. We would need to dedicate. We're tied up on a hoist dock. As hoist dock has increased, our folks are over there running forklifts and stuff. We would need to make sure somebody dedicated on that. And then it's going to be really unpopular for some people too, because they like those spots. But the good of the many often outweighs the needs of the few. So there's no reason why we couldn't look at it. I just haven't had time to really focus on it very much.
We tried to make them, well, you and I discussed, we tried to make a move that with one of our vessels to be more efficient, a better place to trade with another guy that would have fit way better than our spot, and he refused to do it. Wouldn't do it. So that's can be a problem.
Okay, let's wrap up. So people can get back to their other stuff unless there's any other agenda items or comments. We'll call the meeting adjourned.
Just a quick question, what goes on with the platform?
So I update it based on what we talked about here and then finalize it and I submit it to the commission. I've been asked to submit it to the commission at the next meeting as a recommendation, as a recommendation to the commission that this is a document that describes how the terminal is used. Please either adopt it or take it into consideration as you look for other opportunities for revenue at that shared space.
But it doesn't matter if we adopt it or not. What you're saying is.
I think we had a consensus here around it. I didn't hear anybody say they didn't support it from the committee. And then we're just advisors to the commission, so we are going to advise them that they.
All right, because I want a document that I can take with me when I'm meeting with other people to say this is the commercial use of this facility.
You will be presenting it to the full commission.
Yes.
So-
It's on a consensus basis.
So as far as that goes, we're good to go right now. So if
Yeah, I will
take that
finalize
with me,
this today.
I have support. Okay.
Well, Commercial Fishing Users Committee.
Well, and this document does can be modified before it's presented, correct?
Like I just said,
This is not what you're going to take.
Right, no, as soon as she has it, then I just want to know that I have full support of this committee.
Right, I'm hearing from this end of the table
Yeah.
probably.
No, that's good.
Yeah.